Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth video of my DDLC beginners modding tutorial. Today we are going to cover ATL, which is the animation and transformation language that comes with Renpy. We are going to talk about how to add custom assets to the game, like backgrounds, music, sprites and things like that. And we are going to learn how to customize the GUI, at least a little bit. So let's get right started. Before we start with the actual modding, I want to take advantage of something that happened by pure luck. Sometimes when you open ModMaker, you will see that it's going to say here updates are available, as well as down here. What happens is, Wise, the maker of ModMaker and the template, often updates the mod template with bug fixes and new features and stuff like that. If you click here in updates available, we can see that here I'm on version 4.2.2, which was the version available when I started this tutorial, and now the latest version is 4.2.3. To update, all we need to do is click this sort of link and it's going to automatically download it and apply it. And now we are up to date. Now, this isn't going to update for the projects that you already have created, so like this DDLC tutorial is going to stay on 4.2.2, but any projects that you may create in the future are going to use the new template that you just updated to. Okay, so let's start with ATL. ATL is Renpy's animation and transformation language, and as the name implies, it's the main way to do animations and transformations. Transformations being simply moving the images that you use on the screen, left, right, up, zoom and stuff like that. ATL is quite a complex thing. As you can see, the documentation for ATL is quite long and there's a lot of different functions and features that you can use. And it just takes a lot of time to get used to all these things and learn how to use them. So for today, we are just going to focus on the basics that allow you to do most of the animations that you will probably need to do for your mod. So how to use ATL? Like I just said, ATL basically is the main way for you to move things across the screen. To make it easier to see what's happening, off camera I imported a square into the game, because with a square it's easier to see its borders and see exactly what's happening. Let me just get rid of Sayori here real quick. By the way, if you put a hashtag before a line, it's commented, and lines that are commented don't count towards the mod, they're just comments that you can add to your mod. And I'm just going to show square so you see what exactly I did. And you can see it's just a white square. Now, before we get using ATL, I need you to understand two things. The first one is that Renpy has an internal resolution. What I mean by this is that regardless of the resolution of your screen, if it's 1080p or 4K, whatever it may be, Renpy, to do its calculations internally on the images, on the places of the images, it always uses a set resolution. And for DDLC mods, the default resolution is 720p, so 1280 by 720. If you really want to, you can change it, but it's a lot of work because you have to change all the transforms, get all new images, and you're basically going to remake the game from zero. So I recommend against it. So for now, just keep in mind that the game always thinks in 720p. For the second thing, I'm going to give you a little introduction to 2D screen coordinates. So, let's imagine that this rectangle is our screen. Now, to tell the game where we want to place something, we need some sort of coordinate system. You're probably familiar with the Cartesian coordinate system, in which you have a 0, 0, and then you can go to the left and to the right, and you have a negative and a positive x, and a positive and a negative y. This works in basically the same way, except the 0, 0, instead of being in the middle, it's in the top left corner. From the top left corner, when we go to the right, we have a positive x, So as we go to the right, the x coordinate increases, and as we go down, the y coordinate also increases. So inside the screen, we only have positive coordinates. We can go outside it for, if you want, for example, to show an image that's somewhat outside but just shows a little bit, we can go outside it, but inside the screen we only have positive coordinates. As you can see in the legends I put, there's also two ways of representing the same thing. The first one is with pixel values. So for example, this corner is pixel 00, this corner right here is pixel 0 on the X because we're all the way to the left, and pixel 720 because our screen is 720p and all the way to the bottom is 720. On this corner we have the opposite. We have a fully positive X, 1280, and a 0 Y because we're at the top. And here we are both on the maximum value, 1280 and 720, we're here. So if we have a point somewhere here, we're about 960 pixels to the right and 144 pixels down. The second way is with fractions. So we can divide the screen into fractions. So for example, here is 00, all the same, but here we are at 0%, if you want, of the screen to the right, but we're 100% to down on the y-axis, so it's a 1, because we're talking about fraction from 0 to 1. So about here is 0.5y. About here would be 0.5x. Or as you can see in this point here, this is about 0.75 to the right on the x-axis and 0.2 down on the y-axis. And this is also what Renpy uses to identify a place on the screen. You can use either pixel coordinates or fractions, and you can use whatever you're most comfortable with. Okay, so let's try and apply this to our sprite. Now you can see that by default it just placed the cube somewhere here in the middle. Okay, let's put our cube at 0, 0. How do you use ATL? When you have a show statement like this, you can at the end of the statement put a colon. And the next lines that are indented, that we talked about in the first episode, are ATL for this square. So for example, to position on the x-axis, we use x pause, let's do 0, and y pause for the y-axis, 0. And if we go back and auto reload, it went to the corner. So why did it went to the corner? By default, a sprite is also controlled by its top left corner. So when you say x pause 0 and y pause 0, what you're doing is placing the top left corner of your sprite on this position. In this case, it's 0, 0. So for example, let's put x pause at 0.5. As you can see, the top left corner of the sprite was placed on 0.5 on the x and 0 on the y, which is all the way at the top. If you want to change how the sprite is controlled, so for example, if you want the x pause and y pause to be done according to the middle of the sprite, you can use x anchor and y anchor. So you do x anchor, in this case 0.5, and y anchor 0.5. And now you can see that the middle of the sprite is at 0.50 because the rest of the sprite is outside of the screen. If we do 0.5, 0.5 on the positions, it's now in the middle of the screen, because with x anchor and y anchor we are controlling the middle of the square, and with x pause and y pause we're putting it right in the middle of the screen. Let's say for example we do 0.75 on the x pause, it's going to go more to the right. As I said before, you can also use pixel values. So for example, the middle of the pixel values would be 640 and 360. Oops, wrong key. and as you can see, it's in the middle, as this is 1280 divided by 2 and this is 720 divided by 2. Another ATL statement that is used very commonly is the zoom, which just zooms. So for example, if you do zoom, let's say 0.5, it makes the square smaller. If you do like 1.7 or something like that, it's going to get bigger. Another ATL statement that's used a lot is X-align and Y-align. This replaces both of these, and it guarantees that your sprite always stays inside the screen. So for example, if you do X-align 0 and X-align 0, yes, and Y-align 0, going to see that it's, let me take out the zoom, sorry. Going to see that it's right against the left. And if you do Y-align 1, for example, it's right against the bottom. So essentially, if you do, for example, X-align 0, it's going to take the leftmost border of your sprite and put it to the left, and if you do X-align 1, it's going to put the right of the sprite to the right of the screen. So this makes sure that your sprite is always fully inside the screen without you having to worry about the anchor and the position. If you take a look at the documentation, you're going to find that there's a lot more properties. For example, one I was forgetting that's probably very used as well is rotate, if you want to rotate your sprite. So for example, if I put it in the middle and rotate it by 45 degrees, it rotates by 45 degrees. Now, the rotation can be tricky, and I want to point this out. Don't forget that the rotation is also done in relation to the anchor, and that the anchor by default is not in the center, it's in the top left corner of the sprite. So if I do X pos 0.5 and Y pos 0.5 and I rotate by 45 degrees, it's not going to do what you expect, which is put it in the middle and rotate by 45 degrees in place. Because it's rotating in relation to the top left corner, it's going to do some very weird things. So if you want to do the typical rotation that you imagine as a rotation, you need to set the X anchor. Oops. You need to set the X anchor to 0.5 and the Y anchor to 0.5 as well, and then it's going to do the rotation as you would expect. But as I was saying, there are a lot of transforms for ATL, as you can see, and it just takes a lot of time and a lot of practice to learn how to use most of these. It's not that they're very complicated, it's just something that you have to wrap your hand around and just get used to them. Over time you get better and better as you use them. So that was the transformations part of the animation and transformation language. So what about the animations? This is where you can get things to move in the screen from one place to another. And that's done with the warpers, which are just above here. These are the most used, you have a lot of them here, but these are the most used warpers. Warpers are interpolation functions. What interpolation does is it takes two values and smoothly transitions between the two of them. So let's just see one example so it's easier to see what we're talking about. Let's use the linear, which is the most simple interpolation. How you do this is, let's say, we will first set it to be all the way to the left. And then we are going to do a linear interpolation over 3 seconds. It's first the type of interpolation that you want to do, then the time, then the attribute that you want to change. In this case, let's change the X pos, and what you want to change it to in the end. So I'm going to say 1.0. So what this is doing is we're setting the X pos to 0.0, and then linearly over 3 seconds, we are going to change the X position to 1. So we can see how this looks. It's going to start in the left and slowly move over 3 seconds to the right. Now, as you can see, doing one of these is pretty simple, but you can combine multiple of these to do some really complicated things. There are other warpers that tend to look more natural. For example, the ease, as it says here, it starts slow, speeds up, and then slow down. If we see how that looks, if we use ease and we play it, you can see it looks a lot more natural because it has a small ramp up stage and then it does the rest, and then it has a small slow down stage. Like I said just a moment ago, using just one animation is pretty easy. As you can see, it's just 2 words and 2 numbers. What's difficult is if you have some complicated movement that you want to do in your head, it's hard to break it down into its components and figure out how exactly to achieve that effect with these animations. There are, like I said, a lot more things to ATL, but there's just no time to cover it all, or I would be here forever. It really just comes down to practice. You are doing a mod, you have some idea of something you want to do and you don't really know how to do it, and you'll just start using more and more components of ATL as you need them, and over time you get used to it and it becomes much easier to create the transforms that you want. So for now, as this is a beginner's tutorial, I'm just going to leave it there. So now that we know how to move things on the screen, let's actually put some new things on the screen. Let's get to the assets. So I have here a folder with a bunch of assets that I'm going to use for the tutorial. But first things first, where do you even put the assets? Let's open the game folder of our mod, and while it isn't mandatory to put it inside this folder, there is a folder called mod assets here, which is destined or created with the intent of people putting their assets there. So let's just put it inside here. Another thing that we can do is, instead of just dumping all our assets to this folder, we can create subfolders. Again, this isn't mandatory, but if you're doing a fairly big mod with a lot of assets, new assets, it's going to get quite confusing quite quick. So if you can organize things by putting each type of asset in its own folder, it gets a lot easier to search through things when you want them. So for example, here I'm going to say BG, create a folder called BG, and I'm going to put my backgrounds in it. I'm going to just copy instead of moving. I'm going to create a folder called Sprites and put my sprites in there. I'm going to create a folder called Fonts and put my fonts in there. A music folder for my music. An images folder for my random images. A movies folder for my videos, and a GUI folder for assets that are going to be part of the GUI and not necessarily in the mod itself, the story of the mod itself. Now, these folders don't have these names, they don't need to have these names, it's not mandatory. You can call them whatever you want, you can have the folders or not have the folders if you want to just dump all the things here. I just think it's a good idea because it's always nice to be organized and it may save you time in the long run. Okay, so let's actually add these things to the game. Once again, there's no mandatory place to define the images. In fact, there's no mandatory place for nothing in Renpy. When you compile the mod, Renpy just takes every single RPY file in your folders, puts it all together into one big file and compiles that, so it has no idea if you have separate files or not. But again, for organization's sake, you might as well put your definitions in definitions.rpy. This is the file where all the original things for the DDLC are defined. For example, we have all the audios here, the backgrounds, and all the sprites for our 4 doggies, which are a lot of sprites. So let's just put all our things together at the bottom so we know where they are. Okay, so let's just add a simple image. Any image, for example, let's add our share here. Just an image of a share. To add an image, you just do image, the name that you're going to use in your mod. So in this case, I'm just going to call it share. And then, the path to the image from the game folder. What I mean by this is if you go here to your game folder, you want to put the path to the image from here. So from here, to get to your image, you do mod assets, images, share.png. So that's what you're going to add here. Mod assets, images, share.png. So now if I go here to my story and I remove the square and I do show share. Oh, I misspelled assets, I'm sorry. Assets. And we have a share. But as you can probably see, the share is way too big. So let's just make it smaller with the ATL that we just learned. So we're going to put a colon and do zoom like 0.3 maybe. And there we have, now we have a share. Let's move it to the center of the screen, for example. X align 0.5, Y align 0.5. And now we have our share in the center of the screen. Okay, so now let's add a background maybe. Let's go to the same place. And if we go here, we have, oh, not here, here, we have 2 backgrounds in our BG folder, an alley and a city day. So let's add just city day. It's exactly the same thing. Image city day equals mod assets pg city day.jpg in this case. And in our story here, if instead of using MC's room, we use city day and we go back and forwards, we now have our new BG. Now you'll notice that we have a background, but we don't have the BG keyword like we had on the original DDLC backgrounds. This BG keyword is not mandatory, but I'm still going to recommend that you add it. You can just come here to the image and do image bg city day equals the path to the picture. And in your story, you add here the bg, and it works all the same. When you have 2 words like this, they just combine together to identify an image. You can think of the first word as if it was like a category and the second the true identifier. So in this case, we're defining like an image from the BG category and it's the city day BG. It's just another way, as with the folders, just another way to keep yourself more organized. So let's add our other BG, for example, image BG alley equals all assets bg alley.jpg. And if we switch to our alley, we are going to see that something is weird. If we look at our full image, you can see that the image that's in the game is quite cropped. That's because this image, this alley image, is in 1080p. As I told you in the beginning of that video, DDLC mods by default are 720p. So if you want your images to fit perfectly, they also need to be 720p, which our city day image was, and that's why it fit perfectly. My recommendation is that you do this outside of the game. So try to get 720p pictures. If you have a picture that it's of other resolution, use Paint or some online tool to make it 720p. But if for some reason you really don't want to do that, you can also use ATL to do this. So what you do is you give it a name, all the same, but instead of doing this, you start an ATL block. In the first line, you put the path like this, and then you do the zoom. I know that a zoom for 1080p to 720p is 0.67. And now we have the full picture. This zoom value will of course depend on the resolution of the original picture. If it's bigger, the zoom value will have to be smaller. I just happen to know that from 1080p to 720p is 0.67. Okay, so that's images. What about the video? There's actually two ways to include a video in your mod. The first one is directly in the script. I'm going to delete the share. And the first way is you put a $sign and you write Renpy dot movie cutscene, and in parentheses and in double quotes you put the path to the video. In this case it's mod assets movies rain.webm. And if I go here after MC talks, you can see that the video plays to the end and then it skips to the next line. This way of showing a video actually works as a cutscene, as the name implies. The video goes full screen, it covers everything, it plays, and then it moves on with a script. The second way to show a video is to also define it as an image. This has some advantages and disadvantages compared to this. So let's go back to the definitions. To define a video as an image, you start in the same way as you do any other image. You do image and the name that you want. So let's say rain video. But after the equals, you're going to do movie with a capital M and then play equals and the path to the video. In this case, mod assets movies rain.webm. Now the special thing about defining a movie as an image like this is that you can actually treat it as if it was an image. I mean, anything that you can imagine you can do with an image, you can do with a movie. You can use it as a background, you can move it or zoom it and move it with ATL, literally anything. They're, as far as the code is concerned, they are both the same thing. So let's use it somehow. For example, instead of using the background alley as a background, let's use the movie. Let's just call it scene rain video. And as it works like it is an image, you can, for example, also use the transitions with them. So if I go back, you can see that the video starts playing, the transition works as if it was an image, and the video plays. Another difference with defining the video like this is that by default it loops. You can see that it's going back to the beginning. The video is only 5 seconds long. You can see that every 5 seconds it comes to the beginning. If you don't want it to loop, you can go to the definition and after this path you can put a comma and write loop equals false. And if we show it now, it's going to play, but when it reaches the end, it's just going to stop. But because it was working as our background, it disappeared and it just left nothing. It's just a default texture for nothing. So I'm going to take this opportunity to talk to you about the pause command. What a pause does is it pauses the execution as the name implies. So for example, here, I'm going to delete this cutscene. I have a place where MC says, welcome to my room, then Shiori saws, I'm going to do that now, and then the MC talks again. So after MC talks here, I'm going to do a $, pause, and in parentheses 3.0 seconds in this case. So what this is going to do is, after MC talks, I'm going to click, the game is going to pause for 3 seconds, and then it's going to continue. So as you can see, welcome to my room, I'm going to click, it pauses for 3 seconds, and then it shows Sayori and MC says test. This is useful in many situations, and you're going to see that as your code, it's just going to naturally pop up, and you're going to wonder, how do I pause this? And this is how. But I'm going to show you one example of how you can use this. Okay, so I know that this video is 5 seconds long. So I'm just going to do this dissolve. Knowing that the video is 5 seconds long, I know it's going to play for 5 seconds. But as you just saw, because it's treated as an image, Renpy doesn't wait for the video to play or something like that. It just puts it there, it does what it has to do, and it keeps going with the script. So it keeps going with welcome to my room, test, whatever it may be. But I don't want that to happen. I want the video to play and then something else to happen only at the end of the video. Okay, so if I know that the video is 5 seconds long, what can I do? I guess I can start playing the video, pause for 4 seconds, let's say, while the video plays, and then show, for example, our new BG, City Day, with a dissolve of 1 second. So this is going to start playing the video, it's going to pause the script for 4 seconds here, and then it's going to show the City Day BG with another dissolve of 1 second. 1 plus 4, it's 5. So let's see how this looks. We're back, the video shows up, pauses for 4 seconds, and then the city appears. You can see that the video is probably a bit smaller than 5 seconds, so I'm just going to reduce this to 3 because it shows a little bit of the default texture. It plays for 3 seconds, and then it shows the City Day BG. So this is one example of how to use the pause, but of course you can use it however you want. The last thing that I want to point out about the videos is that you can't really play any kind of video. So if we go to the movie section of the Renpy docs, you can see here the codecs and the containers that Renpy supports. And for example, MP4 files are not supported. I know MP4 is very popular, but for complicated legal reasons, MP4 is not included. At least I think it's for legal reasons. So for example, you can see here I use the WebM format. So I just want you to be aware of this, and if you're doing everything right and for some reason the video still isn't playing, it's probable that the codec or the container just isn't supported. So take a look at this. I know the codecs are a bit harder to check how it is because it's internal to the file, but just keep this in mind in case something doesn't work. Okay, so let's add some of our own music. The music is similar, but it's a little bit different. Instead of image, of course, you're going to do define audio dot the name that you want to use in your script. In this case, I'm going to call it Bittersweet, which is the name of the song, equals, and then the path to the song. In this case, it's music bittersweet.ogg. I'm pretty sure MP3 works in this case, but I just prefer to use OGG. I'm used to using OGG files. So if you go back and instead of playing the T3 music, let's play music bittersweet. And if I turn the music on, you can hear that our new music is playing, which I happen to compose. Now there's just one small detail when it comes to songs. Usually you want your song to loop seamlessly, or it would be good if your music looped. But a lot of songs in the beginning and the end have some kind of intro or outro that don't allow for the looping. But Renpy has a way of going around that. Here in the beginning of the path, you can use these angle brackets and we can put 3 different things inside here. You don't need to use all 3, you can use any combination, but there's 3 possible things. The first thing is the from clause. If you do from and a number, which can have a decimal point, this is going to play the song only starting from these many seconds. So if I do this right now, the song, instead of starting at the beginning, is going to start at 20.0 seconds, or for example 20.3 seconds. The second thing that we can have is a to. So for example, to, let's say 22.5 seconds. Like this, the song is only going to play from 20.3 seconds to 20.5 seconds and always repeat between these two. So if I turn the audio on again, you can hear that it's always just repeating those 2 seconds. There's a third thing, which is the loop. If you do loop, and let's say I do 20.3, and I'm going to change the from to 10.5. What is this going to do? If you have both a from and a loop, the from is only going to apply to the first time the music plays. So what is going to happen if I play this? The very first time the music plays, it's going to start from 10.5. Then it's going to play up to 22.5, and then in the next loop it's only going to play from 20.3. So you can, for example, put the from at 0, and this, like this, the song is going to start from the beginning, but when it starts to loop, instead of going back to the beginning, it's only going to play from 20.3. So I can show you that if I do, for example, 15.5, and I come here, it's playing for about 5 seconds, 7 seconds, but then the loop is only 2 seconds. And this is more or less how you can achieve loops. I'm going to take this opportunity that I'm talking about audio to talk to you about the audio channels. By default, Renpy has 3 audio channels. You can see it has a music audio channel, a sound audio channel, and a voice audio channel. These are just tracks in which you can play sounds. The only difference between these channels is that music automatically loops and sound and voice don't. But what this really is for is so you can play music and play sound effects at the same time. So for example, if I want to play my song and at the same time the song is playing, I want to play some sound effect, I can't play it in the music channel because each channel can only play one sound at a time. So if I want to play, for example, a sound of a closet open, which is something that comes with DDLC, I have to do this. I'm going to play the music, I'm going to play my music in the music channel and play my sound in the sound channel. And like this, I can have them play both at the same time. The music is playing, and then the sound plays on its own channel. If you really need to, you can define your own channels, but I'm not going to go over it now. Okay, so finally, let's add some sprites to our scene. Sprites, at the end of the day, really are just normal images. We just call them sprites, so when we are talking to each other, we know what we are talking about, but they're really just real images. So if I go into my sprites folder here, you can see that I have a Natsuki, that's a full body, and for Natsukis, there are just kinda half a Natsuki without the head. Let's do the full body one first. As with the BG, you can give a category to an image. This is how it's done in the original. You have image, the category of Natsuki, and then the letters and numbers that we learned in the second episode. I'm going to explain how this aim composite works in a minute. But first, let's just add the other Natsuki. This is quite simple. You're just going to do image Natsuki for a category, so it's relegated to her. And since it's just a full image and it doesn't really correspond to anything, I'm just going to call it an special suit, because she's wearing a suit. And the path to the image. Well, assets, sprites, 0.png, I think it's called. So if I go to our story and next to Sayori, where is Sayori? She's here. I show Natsuki and special suit at T44, and there she is. It really is just a normal image. One thing that's probably worth pointing out is if you want to use these without needing to modify anything, your sprites should be 960 by 960. This is the default sprites, the default size of all sprites in DDLC, so if you want everything to be about the same size, your sprites should be 960 by 960. Basically every DDLC pack that you can find online already has this size correct, but if you're doing your own sprites, try to do them at this size. Like this, you don't need to do any changes. Okay, so if you have full sprites, it's really just as easy as adding another image. But what about these half sprites? This just exists because it's how the original DDLC created the sprites. Instead of creating one sprite for every possible pose, they separated the heads and the bodies into parts, and then they mixed the parts to create different sprites. This way they save a lot of space and the game can be a lot smaller. So we have like 15 different heads or something, and what we do is we take the head, we join it with the left side of her body, we join it with a right side of her body, and we get a full sprite. They're all exactly the same size and they fit together like a puzzle. And this is what these lines in definitions.rpy are doing. And I'm just going to steal one of these lines so I don't have to write everything from scratch. And I'm going to explain this line as I write a new one. So this is how Natsuki's 1A pose is defined in the original DDLC. It uses the one pose left side of her body, the pose number 1 right side of the body, and the hey head. So how is this line constructed? You can just take this line and modify it, but I'm going to write it from scratch so I can explain it as I write it. So the first part is exactly the same. We're going to do Natsuki, and if you remember from the first episode or from the second episode, I told you that to use a casual outfit, you add a B to the sprite. So to follow in the same logic, because we have a new outfit, I'm just going to call it 1CA. Then you do im.composite. This is just a Renpy function that joins multiple images together. The first thing that you need to write is the size of the final image. As I told you before, all the sprites from the original DDLC are 960 by 960. Then, separated by commas, for each image that you want to add together, you're going to do a pair of numbers and the path to the image. The pair of numbers represents where to align the picture. Because the pictures are all the same size, we are going to align them all to the 00 pixel in the same way that I described it in the beginning of the video, and they're all just going to join together perfectly because the images are already drawn in the way that they will fit perfectly. So the first image it's going to be at the 0 pixel, and it's going to be mod assets, sprites, and I need to copy because I don't know the name. Oops, it's going to be the name of the sprite. In this case, it's the left side of our body. And then the next image, I'm going to align it to the 0 pixel, and it's going to be almost the same as this. Oops, but instead of left, it's going to be right. And then the third image, we are missing the head, going to align it to the 0 pixel, and I'm just going to use the heads that come with the DDLC because for these sprites I don't have any head, so I'm just going to use the head, the hey head. To delete this line. So now we have a new picture of Natsuki called 1CA that mixes this picture. Whoops, that mixes this picture here with this picture here and one of the heads from the game. So if I show Natsuki 1CA, I probably wrote something wrong. Oh, I'm missing here the .png. And we have Natsuki with our new outfit. Of course, I need to point out that these sprites are done in a way that they fit perfectly with the heads from the game. If you're doing your own sprites, you need to make sure that either you do everything yourself, or if you want to use the head from the game, you need to make sure that they fit perfectly with the original head. You can see that there's bits of hair here, for example, and their neck needs to be the perfect size to mix with the head. I just wanted to tell you about this because a lot of sprite packs you can find online come like this, and you might need to put them into your game like this. Some already come with the definitions made, but you might need to do them yourself. Just to make sure there's not confusion, you don't need to, for example, mix 3 images. You can mix just 2 images, for example, like this. And of course, she's not going to have a head because I didn't give her a head, but you can mix 2 images, you can mix 4, 5, 6, however many you have. So you'll probably mix 2 images if you have a full body and then use a head, a separate head. For example, you'll have 2 images. This is just something that you might use, you might not use. It's something that the original DDLC used, so that's why I wanted to point it out. So now we know how to add pretty much every kind of asset to the game. So let's add some assets to the GUI, to the menus. Now this is probably the most complicated part of the tutorial, of the whole tutorial, simply because it's so big. The screens, as they are called, are defined in screens.rpy, and as you can see, it's a really big file. This defines how everything looks from this text box here to this menu, to the main menu, to the options menu, the load menu. Everything is defined by screens. Because this is so big, there's no way I can tell you about everything that you can do here. And besides that, changing things very deeply, so moving things around the screens, moving the order of things, can be quite difficult. So I'm just going to try and tell you about the things that I notice in the Discord that most people want to change. Another reason that this is kinda hard is because things are kinda scattered. They're not all focused in one place. There are things that are not even inside this screens.rpy file. To give you just a rough idea of how this works, each screen or each page of the menu is defined as a screen. So for example, if we take a look at the screen preferences, which is the screen of the definitions, of the settings, you can see that we have a screen preferences, and then a bunch of kind of complicated things that have text buttons, which are the buttons for window, full screen, text for text, audio, extras, all those things that are in the options menu. Below each screen, associated with each screen, we have styles, and these styles are what defines how things actually look, so things like colors, like size of text, and stuff like that. Because all of this can get pretty complicated, I'm just going to try and tell you how to change the things that I noticed that pretty much everyone wants to change. So the first thing, and the first thing that most people change, is the background for the main menu. It's worth pointing out that when you're defining an image for a menu or something like that, it's the exact same kind of image that you use for backgrounds, for example. You define an image in definitions with the image name equals path, and then you can use that image for a menu, for the background of the menu, for example. So with that in mind, let's change the first thing that pretty much everyone changes, which is the main menu background. And to do this, I want to teach you a little trick about Visual Studio Code. I'm in screens.rpy, and I want to change the main menu background. Okay, the main menu background is probably defined in the screen main menu, so I'm going to hit Ctrl F in screens.rpy and search for screen main menu. Okay, here it is, screen main menu. I'm going to take a look at this, and there's a bunch of ifs and elses here. This is because of the ghost screen, that if you know about that Easter egg for DDLC, but we can see that there's a head menu BG here. Menu background sounds like the menu background. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select menu BG and I'm going to hit Ctrl Shift F. What Ctrl Shift F does is it searches here, you can write here or you can search whatever was selected. It searches in every single file that's open here on your file explorer. It searches for this sentence in every single one. So now you can look for where menu BG is defined, and you can see that menu BG is defined here. Okay, so we click here and it took us to the splash.rpy file, but we can see that it's here that it's defined menu BG. Okay, so this is the image that it's being used. Let's just switch it for one of our own images. I'm just going to use one of the backgrounds that we have defined there. All assets, PG, Ali, why not? .jpg. Now in this case, you're going to need to comment out this menu BG move. This is a transform that makes that polka dots image move in the main menu. Unless you want your image to move as well, you need to comment this out with an hashtag. So if now we go to the game and it's going to reload, and you can see it has our new BG now. But if we go into the game and we pause, you can see it has the old BG, because actually the game BG and the main menu BG are separate, but it's just below, it's this game menu BG. You can just do the same thing, copy this here, paste it here, and take out the loop, and now you have your BG on the game menu as well. Another thing a lot of people want to change is the logo that appears here. Let's do the same trick that we did just a minute ago. Let's go to screens.rpy, go already in screen menu, you can look here, and we can see here a menu logo. This is probably what I'm looking for, so I'm going to Ctrl Shift F, and the image menu logo is here. Oh, and it uses this logo here. I'm just going to change it for a logo that I did off camera. Not here, but here, which I just substituted the letters for modding tutorial. And I call it, let me copy the name, So I'm just going to change this for mod assets GUI / DDLC tutorials logo. And if I go back to the menu, it's going to show my new logo. This time you can leave this menu logo move because this is just this intro, and because I'm using an image of the exact same size, it works the same. If you want to make your own logo, you have here a template, an empty template that you can draw over, which is in the mod assets folder. It already comes in the mod assets folder by default. And if you have Photoshop skills, you can go to the mega thread in the DDLC mods subreddit, and there are Photoshop files available that you can alter the colors and everything like that if you have some Photoshop skills. Another thing that a lot of people want to change is this pink background behind the buttons, the navigation buttons. This one is actually, if you go to screens, it's here below the screen main menu in one of the styles of the main menu frame. It's the background. If we go to menu nav, it's also in splash.rpy. Here you can see it's just an image. It's just a regular 720p image that happens to look like that. It's transparent all the way to the right and only has that thing on the left. And this leads me to another tip that I want to give you. If, let's say, you weren't able to find this background because you were like focused on the main menu and you weren't seeing this background here. If we go here to the mega thread on the DDLC mods subreddit and we go to art resources and we go to the DDLC mods community drive, here you're going to find the original game files. If you want, you can just download this to your PC to be faster access, or you can just use this. And this has all the original files from the DDLC game all unpacked. If you go here to original BGs and sprites and to GUI, you can find all the images that are used in the GUI. Sometimes you may have to look around a little bit, but I know that that background is in overlay. Here it is. So now I know that this image of the main menu, this thing here, is called mainmenu.png. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to VSC, I'm going to Ctrl-Shift-F, and up here at the top, I'm going to write main menu.png. Okay, so now I can see that this image is used here. Okay, so I can click here. Okay, so I just figured out where the image is, so now I can replace it if I want. You can also download these images from here and modify them with Photoshop or something like that, so you can replace them with your own images. And this, in the beginning, before you know where everything is, which is what I did a lot when I was just starting out with modding, is I did this all the time. I didn't know where something is, so I went here, I looked for the picture, I searched for the picture in VSC, and now I knew where the picture was defined, where it was used, so I can replace it with my own. And that's mostly where I learned where things actually were. This is also useful, like I said, because you can download images from here and modify them to your content, or you can find images from the internet that most of them are already the correct size. It's also pretty easy to remove things completely from the main menu. So let's say I don't want the girls to appear here in the main menu. In the screen main menu, you can see all these adds. These are a keyword that add, like the name implies, something to the screen. So if I want to remove the girls, I just need to remove all these menu art Y, menu art N, etc. that correspond to all the girls. So I'm just going to put an hashtag before each one. I don't need to remove the ghosts because these only appear in very specific circumstances. I'm going to remove S and I'm going to remove M. The only caveat to this particular thing is that you can't have this. Because this line is going to be ignored, you can't have an else statement that doesn't have anything in it, because you can see if I try to run this, it's going to give an error. So if you ever see an else statement or an if statement that's empty, you also need to comment that out. And if you do this, and the game reloads, all the girls are gone. You can do this for anything else that you might want to remove. If you want to remove, for example, this, you will have to go here to the background and remove this background. And it's going to be gone. Another thing most people want to change is the color of these letters here. These buttons are actually part of the screen called navigation. So if we search here for screen navigation, you can see here we have all the new game, history, save game, buttons, etc. Below that we have, as I told you, the styles. You have here a style navigation button text, and we have here 4 things that control the lines. The colors, I'm sorry. The color itself is the color from inside the text. So if we change this, for example, to red or something, it's going to change the inside. Oops, I went too far back. But what you probably want to change is the outlines. As you can see here, the outlines of this text, or the color of the outlines of this text, are actually defined somewhere else. So if we search for this and we go to the beginning of the file, oops, you can find here a text outline color. It's probably best to change it here, since this is also going to change it in other places for consistency's sake. So let's just change it to a blue, I don't know. And the outline is now blue. But as you can see, when we hover, it turns pink. This is probably something you don't want. This is because we have, as you can see, 3 types of outlines here. We have the outlines that are used when the text is just idle, doing nothing. Then we have the hover outlines, which are the colors that are used when you hover with the mouse. So let's change these to, let's say, a lighter blue. Change both of them. And now when we hover, it changes to another blue. The insensitive outlines are used when the button can't be clicked. Here, for example, because the button is already selected, it can't be clicked, so it's insensitive to a click, so it uses another color. So let's put this even a lighter blue, I guess. And there we go, it's all blue. Yet another thing that a lot of people want to change is the color of these numbers here on the load page and the color of these squares. These are, as you can expect, in the screen load. There's a screen save and the screen load, but they both use the file slot screen as a base, which is just below. And if we go down to the styles, you can see that the squares for the buttons, you can see that the squares for the save slots aren't actually a color, but they are an image of a square. So I guess I will show you what I would do to change these two. I will go here to the Google Drive I told you before, go here to the buttons, here are the 2 images. I will download the 2 images. I didn't download the second one. Okay. Oh, I downloaded 2. I would, for example, open in Photoshop and replace the color with my own color, making sure to not change the size of the overall image. Do the same for the other one. Now put them both in my mod assets folder, in the GUI folder, go back to the code and substitute this. I kept the same name, so I'm just going to substitute this with mod assets / GUI. And if we go back to our mod and go to the load screen, I forgot, if you want this to work, you have to add one more line to the slot buttons and change this hover to insensitive. This line is missing here, but now if we go here, it changed to these ones. Actually, you should use the idle for the insensitive backgrounds. You should use the idle background. So now that we changed this, it's pretty obvious that these buttons here are still pink, as well as, for example, these labels and these buttons here in the settings screen. So these are, you can change them one by one if you want, but it's easier if you go to GUI.rpy, which is another file that it's here, that has some things defined here. And if you change all these values here, you can see what each of them does. So let's change this to like a very light blue. Let's change this to a really dark blue. Change the overcolor to a medium blue. The selected color to a slightly different blue. And the insensitive color to a sort of gray or something. And if we go back to the game, you can see that these have changed, as well as in the load game, these ones down here. We're still missing these labels here, but those will have to be changed in the screen preferences. They will be in the label text. It's this outline here. So let's also change it to a blue. Now, of course, I'm just choosing colors at random here, but you should be more careful choosing the colors so it actually looks good. And now it's all blue. As for this extras menu, if it's your very first time coding a mod, I'm going to recommend that you don't use this menu. Coding the gallery and the awards isn't too easy, so I'm going to recommend that you go here in screens.rpy in line 44, and where it says enable extras menu, turn it to false. This is going to make it so the extras menu disappeared and it's replaced with a credits menu with some credits to the Steam Salvato and to Gangsta Kings of SA, which you are using the template of. So I'm going to recommend that you do that. By the way, as you can see in the settings screen and the load game screen and so on, there's a different background here for the buttons that I didn't remove, but I'm going to leave this one as an exercise for you so you can try to find it with the trick that I teach you from here to use this collection of artwork to find it, okay? One final thing about this is the Recolorize function that comes with the mod template. Let's say I didn't want to remove the background here, but I just wanted to change its color. So let's find it again. I know that's main menu.png. You can see that here in the menu nav, I'm going to go there because instead of just removing it, I'm going to go to its definition, and you can see there is a recolorize line here. So instead of just removing it, I'm going to comment the original line and uncomment this recolorize line. And what this does is it's going to just recolorize the original image with the two colors that you give it here. So I'm going to give it a darker blue and a lighter blue. And if I go back in the game, it's going to show back up, but now it has these colors that I gave it. For images that are just flat things, you can use this Recolorize function if you don't want to make your images from scratch. For more complicated images like the logo, this isn't going to work, you have to get an actual image, but for simple images like this, you can just use the Recolorize function. Another thing that many people change is the font or the text. The font is easiest to change in GUI.rpy. Not far from the top, you have 3 fonts here. This one is used for the actual text of the dialogue inside the mod. So if I just substitute this font for the font that I added to my assets folder, here in fonts, just going to copy this. So let's change this to mod assets, fonts, and this. Forget fonts are a TTF file. And I go in game, you can see that I'm using the new font here. The second name font, I'm just going to use the same for everyone, changes the font of the names here above the dialogue, as you can see. And the third one changes the font in the menus. Probably, as you can see here. As you can see, it doesn't change for every single menu because these labels are still using the default font. These you need to change in the screens.rpy. So if you go to navigation, which you already discussed, that is the buttons that you see on the left. Sorry, screen navigation. And in the navigation button text, we have here the font. If we change this for the font that we just tried, and you're going to see after this reloads that it changed the font for the navigation buttons. The font for this text here at the top lives in the game menu screen. Below, in the style, you are going to find a game menu label text, and this is the font that controls that text at the top. As you can see, it changed now. These labels here, they are going to be changed on the preference screen because we are on the settings screen. So if we go to screen, preferences, and below it, we are going to find a pref label text, and this is the font that you need to change for that. Like this. Now, there's only really one final thing that you can change easily, and that is the text box. And this is also a thing that many people change. As you can see, I have 5 text boxes here, one for each color, or one for each person with the corresponding color. And I want to thank Lemonade for these text boxes. He was the one that made them. And so how do we do this? We have 2 main ways to do this. The first one is going to substitute the box for everyone. To do this, we are going to go to the screen say. This is the screen that defines the actual text box. And below, in the window, we have this background, and this is the text box that controls that. So if we just use, for example, the black one, let's just use the one that's called MC. And we change it here. Whoops, I need to mod assets, same as always. GUI, textbox.mc.png, and if I reload the game, we're using the new text box. Now, the other way is to give one text box to each character. And how will we do that easily? Instead of doing it with screens, we're going to go to definitions and let's search for define MC. These 5 lines are the 5 lines that define the characters. In another episode, I'm going to tell you how to define your custom characters, but for now let's just work with the original ones. The way to give each player its own text box, or each character its own text box, is at the end here, before the closing bracket parenthesis, you add a comma and do window underscore background equals, and then go here to the screens and copy this transform and paste it here. And now just change the text box for each character. So this is for the MC. I'm going to copy all this, and this one is for Sayori, so I'm going to change this to an S. This is just the names I gave the text boxes. Here, this is Monica. I'm going to give it an M. This here is Natsuki. I'm going to give it this an N. And here it's was missing Yuri, so I'm going to give it here. So in my story, I'm going to make everyone talk. I have here Sayori, Yuri, Natsuki, and Monica. And you'll see as each character speaks, the MC has its black text box, Sayori has her blue text box, it talks twice, I'm sorry, Yuri has her purple text box, Natsuki has her pink text box, and Monica has her green text box. And with that, we have pretty much changed everything that it's easy to change. Besides that, really the only thing that you can change about the GUI look is just where things are placed. For example, moving this to the right or changing the order of these menus, stuff like that. But that gets a lot more complicated because you have to handle frames, you have to handle the placement. So it's probably not good to go there in your very first mod. I mean, if you're very committed, you can. It's not that hard. You just have to give it a little time and maybe ask for help in the Discord and people will gladly help you. But of course, this looks horrible because I just chose things at random, but with what I taught you now, you can pretty much change everything, the look of everything that you can see at first sight. So you can already make it look pretty unique, and as I said, if you want to do something a little more advanced, ask in the Discord, people will help you. And I know that was a pretty big episode, but we're finally at the end. I hope I didn't lose you anywhere. I really tried to make this as simple as I could, but it's really not a very simple subject. It's, like I said, it's very long, there's a lot of things to consider. So this really was the best I could do. Again, if you have any questions, the best place to put them is in the Discord, DDLC, the Doki Doki Modding Club, in the mod help channel. People usually answer here in just a couple minutes. If you don't have Discord, leave a question in the comments. I will try to answer as fast as possible. I hope you're doing well and see you in the next one.